So let's bow in. Welcome to the Buddhist Path of Awakening course. We're working our way through Shantideva's The Way of the Bodhisattva. And tonight we're going to finish chapter 8 on meditative concentration. Michael is going to lead off. So Michael?
Welcome, everyone. I'm going to start by talking about what's usually a summer experience, actually. We're 2 days away from the winter solstice, so this is not something that would happen now. But during the summer, especially when I was working full time, there would be times when I would come home and do meditation. And at a certain point, I'd hear the crickets outside. And I'd realized they had to have been there all along, but because I was so distracted and so absorbed, I just didn't hear them. And I think probably this is an experience that people have pretty commonly in meditation, that as the mind settles, we become aware of things that were probably there all along, but we just weren't paying attention to. And so I wanted to begin tonight by looking at verse 89, which I think we did talk about last week, but I thought it was a good place to start. Reflecting in such ways as these upon the excellence of solitude, pacify completely all discursiveness and cultivate the mind of bodhicitta. So the entire first half of this chapter really was describing the excellence of solitude and the importance of pacifying completely all discursiveness, which is what we do with shamatha vipassana meditation practice, where we basically allow the mind to settle into natural peace, actually. Sometimes by using an object such as the breath, sometimes by simply tuning into present awareness and coming back again and again. The excellence of solitude has a lot to do with giving up our attachment to external activities and external phenomena that we become attached to. So really the excellence of solitude, or if you want a different word, you could call it simplicity, has a lot to do with giving up all of the struggle that we engage in with the world around us. And as part of that, as quoted Pema last week, part of that is beginning to see through the unrealistic hopes and fears we attach to the things that we get involved with in the world, that we believe things are permanent or won't change, that in fact are very changeable, that we attribute qualities to things that we see as inherent in objects, but actually have more to do with our attachment and our passion or our clinging, rather than actually being truly in the object itself. And we kind of know on some level this is true because obviously people are attached to different things. People are attracted to different things all the time. If we just think about the changing ideas of human beauty across history, across even just different generations in our own time, and between cultures, we realize that a lot of things that we tend to project onto objects really have more to do with our own attachments, our own fixations, and our own clingings. And it's only by allowing the mind to settle that we begin to see through all of the illusory qualities that we project onto things. So that's really that's the point of the excellence of solitude, for however long we manage that, if it's just a half hour of meditation, or if we're able to go engage in practice for longer periods of time. The important thing is that we begin to let go of thoughts of the past, thoughts of the future, and just settle into the present moment. And just begin to see more clearly. That's more the Vipassana piece. Begin to see more clearly what's going on. Pacifying completely all discursiveness has more to do with relating to our mind itself, where, again, we just allow the mind to settle into its natural peace. We begin to develop the capacity to remain in awareness as thoughts and feelings and perceptions come and go. Without being swayed, we develop a certain steadiness, or as we talked about last week, Trungpa Rinpoche said, that the whole point of meditation paramita was to stabilize thought processes. Having done that, then we can begin to cultivate the mind of bodhicitta, which is what the second half of this chapter is all about. So, if someone could read verse, actually, I should have asked for people who volunteer to read. If people could raise their hands. And while that's happening, I'll read verse 90 because that's really the first thing. So what we're talking about tonight is cultivating the mind of bodhicitta. And the instruction on doing so is strive at first to meditate upon the sameness of yourself and others. In joy and sorrow, all are equal. Thus be the guardian of all as of yourself. So that's really the thrust of the first part of this, the second part of this chapter. It's really what's involved in the next 30 verses, is understanding something about meditation on equality and developing an attitude where we become the guardian of all, as we would ourselves. So it's not quite the same as exchanging self for other, which is the second part, but it's an important first step. And what allows us to do this essentially, and it's something that it's important to keep in mind throughout these, the rest of this chapter, is the nature of egolessness, that the idea of ourselves as a separate I in any kind of permanent solid sense, and the idea of of other as also real in any real permanent and fixed kind of a way, is just that. It's a myth. It's habitual and illusory. It seems convincing, but ultimately there's no real logical basis for it. And that the more we keep that in mind, the more sense this chapter will make. Pema actually divided chapter 8 into 2 chapters in her commentary. And while the first one was called Heartbreak of Samsara, which had to do with developing that appreciation of the importance of solitude, this second half is about dissolving the barriers, and in particular the barriers that we create by holding on to a solid sense of I and a solid sense of other. And what we're asked to do is to develop what some texts call a sense of a greater self, to appreciate the interconnectedness of all beings. And as Shantideva says, become the guardian of all, that we adopt others as equal to ourselves in importance, rather than placing more importance on I and then struggling to achieve some kind of illusory permanent happiness. So a fair amount of what he says in the next 30 verses relates to some of the logic and the reasons for this. And so I think with that, we can actually begin. So could someone read verse 91?
Carolyn.
The hand and other limbs are many and distinct, but all are one, the body to be kept and guarded. Likewise, different beings in their joys and sorrows are like me, all one in wanting happiness.
And so this verse introduces one of the key ideas in terms of the equality of self and other. The great equality is that all beings want to be happy, and all beings don't want to suffer, want to avoid suffering, just as each one of us does. Now, there may be different ideas about what happiness is, and there may be different ideas about what suffering is, but at its heart, at the heart of every being, there's this desire, this wish to be happy and to avoid suffering. And so meditation on this fact means developing the wish to accomplish exactly what Shantideva is talking about, to develop a sense of being a guardian or protector of all beings, because we can connect with all beings on this level. In some texts, developing this concept that rather than thinking of I as just this one single individual, we can actually encompass all beings in our sense of identity. They call this the great self. That's the great self that recognizes the interconnectedness of all beings. And I would just point out that we do have this capacity, and that we do exactly this for some beings, perhaps our parents, our children, our friends, the people we identify with. We do experience joy when they're happy. We do experience unhappiness of some kind when they're experience some kind of suffering. So the idea is to just extend this capability to all sentient beings. In one talk that I heard once on equality, it was compared to a farmer who wanted to irrigate his field. And if the field had a lot of hills and valleys, it would be very difficult to spread the water everywhere. But if the field were flattened, then the water would spread everywhere easily. And the idea was that meditation on the equality of all beings, it does exactly that. It allows us to spread our compassion evenly to all beings. And again, it's very easy to see how all of this really goes against the grain of ego, which would like to see itself as the most important thing, as opposed to having care and concern for all beings. And so in verse 91, he says that even though all the different parts of the body are different, all are one, that the body to be kept and guarded. And this is the attitude that we are urged to develop in regard to all sentient beings, that although there are many and distinct sentient beings, but that all are one, and that all beings could be kept and guarded with compassion. So verse 92, could someone read verse 92?
Philip.
This pain of mine does not afflict or cause discomfort to another's body, and yet this pain is hard for me to bear because I cling and take it for my own.
So the point here is that the pain that we suffer doesn't necessarily bring any discomfort to anyone else, but it's hard for us to bear precisely because of clinging to ego. Trungpa Rinpoche gives an example of a person going into a store and seeing a watch that they like, and the watch somehow falls to the ground and is broken. They wouldn't care that much. But if it was their own watch that fell to the ground and broke, then there would be a great deal of distress, especially if the watch had sentimental value or was very expensive. So what brings the pain is this projected sense of I and mine. And in so many ways, holding on to ego is what makes situations so painful, because I cling and take it for my own, particularly in regard to body. Verse 93.
Shini.
In other beings' pain, I do not feel, and yet because I take them for myself, their suffering is mine and therefore hard to bear.
So, as bodhisattvas, or as aspiring bodhisattvas, we have a willingness to feel the pain, to empathize with others. But of course, we're not going to experience things exactly as other people do. But we still take the attitude that their suffering is mine, and that therefore it does become hard to bear. But again, it's not that we feel exactly as others do, but it's that the suffering of others generates feelings of compassion and empathy, and that as bodhisattvas, we no longer ignore or hide from that we want that. Furthermore, our awareness of the suffering of others furthers our desire to become enlightened, or at least minimally more mindful and more skillful in how we relate to others, so that we can be helpful. Verses 94 through 96.
Mark.
And therefore I'll dispel the pain of others, for it is simply pain, just like my own, and others I will aid and benefit, for they are living beings like my body. Since I and other beings both, in wanting happiness, are equal and alike, what difference is there to distinguish us, that I should strive to have my bliss alone? Since I and other beings both, in fleeing suffering, are equal and alike, what difference is there to distinguish us, that I should save myself and not the others?
So he expresses again here this attitude of taking on or identifying with all beings, seeing our connection to all beings. And therefore, because of this great equality that all beings want happiness and all beings flee suffering, that we can connect with all sentient beings. And that we are open rather than trying to shield ourselves from being open to all sentient beings. Verses 97, 98.
Judith.
Since the pain of others does no harm to me, I do not shield myself from it. So why guard against my future pain, which does no harm to this, my present me? To think that I will have to bear it is in fact a false idea. For that which dies is one thing, what is born is something else.
What these two verses are going to be a little bit tricky to grasp exactly what he means, and in the Tenzin Palden's commentary actually spends several pages on this. But the essential idea is that, again, the pain of others doesn't directly harm us in any way, and for that reason, we don't necessarily shield ourselves from it. But with our own imagined future pain, we do attempt to protect ourselves. And he says that this is in fact based on a false idea. And what these two verses are really getting at some understanding of egolessness, that the I who will experience pain in the future is in fact a very different being from the person who exists now. And that from moment to moment, the I that we cling to in an illusory way ceases to exist from moment to moment. Again, this doesn't mean that we shouldn't take care of things that need to be taken care of. But I think what he's talking about is just again, trying to cut through the obsessive involvement with the self and obsessive involvement with trying to create a comfortable fortress, you could say, for ego, or a cocoon in the Shambhala terms. And he says that it's entirely based on a false idea. It's based on the false idea that there's some kind of permanent thing that we call ego. And again, this is something that becomes clearer to us if we're able to settle in meditation and just see how changeable things are, literally from moment to moment, let alone if we think over longer periods of time in our life, and how very different our feelings and perceptions are. So that this future I doesn't exist. So again, he's saying, why do we become so obsessed with protecting and enhancing the self that is different from the self that exists now? Verse 99.
Ed.
It's for the sufferers themselves, you'll say, to shield themselves from injuries that come. The pain felt in my foot is not my hands. So why, in fact, should one protect the other?
So in this verse, when he says "you'll say," in different verses, he sometimes has it's like a dialogue with himself. In some cases, you could think of the person who's expressing an objection or a question of some kind as ordinary beings. In some cases, it could be the very audience that Shantideva has himself, with monks and practitioners who, were pretty well steeped in Buddhist meditation and philosophy. So in this case, I think what we're being asked to think about, and at least this is at least one interpretation of the verse, is that, again, you could say, well, why would I want to protect other people? It's up to them to take care of themselves. And in one sense, that's ultimately true. But at the same time, what he's saying is that the pain felt in the foot isn't the hand. So and in fact, the hand does protect the foot. We do try to protect ourselves, again, because what he's talking about is this development of an idea of a greater you could say, a greater sense of self or a greater sense of connectedness with all beings. So that, in fact, if we can, we would shield other beings from injuries that come because we have the sense of connectedness with them. Verse 100.
Lodro.
True, it's inadmissible, you'll say. It happens simply through the force of ego clinging. But what is inadmissible for others and myself should be discarded utterly.
So here we're being presented with the argument that some might make that, in fact, any kind of pain that someone happens precisely because they're caught up in the illusion of ego. But his answer to this is, yes, exactly. So we should give up all of it. This is the beginning of Shantideva, I think, refuting what you could say is a nihilistic approach to relating to the suffering of others. So for that, could someone read verses 101 and 102?
Daniel.
Continua and gatherings, so called, like garlands and like armies, are unreal. So there is no one to experience pain, for who is there to be its owner? Suffering has no possessor, therefore no distinctions can be made in it. Since pain is pain, it is to be dispelled. What use is there in drawing boundaries?
So here again, he's continuing to present some back and forth around different ways in which a person might understand egolessness and relative and absolute truth. Continua and gatherings, like garlands and armies, are unreal. This is another way of thinking about the unreal nature of ego, that ego is a collection of a lot of different things, and something like a garland of flowers or an army is a collection of a lot of individuals, and that the label army or garland and the perception of something being real as a garland or army is conceptually projected onto all of these individual parts. And a person could argue that if there's no one to experience pain, where is the owner? That suffering has no possessor, and therefore no distinctions can be made in it. To which Shantideva says, since pain is pain, it is to be dispelled. Why are you drawing some kind of boundary there about what should or shouldn't be experienced, what should or shouldn't be done? Continue with verse 103.
Should ye?
But why dispel the pains of all? You cannot argue in this way. If my pain is removed, so too should that of others. If theirs is not, then neither should be mine.
So basically what he's saying here is that in absolute truth, yes, there is no true suffering, no true sufferer, but that's not where we're living. That's not our experience of the world. At a relative level, there clearly is pain and suffering. And again, ultimately, the cause of a discontent is our false sense of separateness or ego, the duality of self or other that's created by mind. But that what we want to do is just alleviate suffering, and that there's, it's not a question of feeling that, or applying a nihilistic point of view and using that as a reason to evade some sense of connection or some sense of compassion for beings. Could someone read verses 104 through 106?
Carolyn.
Compassion makes us feel such pain, you say. So why should we make efforts to engender it? But thinking of the sufferings of beings, how can you regard as great the smart of your compassion? And if through such a single pain a multitude of sorrows can be cured, such pain as this all loving people strive to foster in themselves and others. Thus, Supusha Chandra, knowing that the king would cause him harm, did nothing to escape from tribulation, that the pains of many should be ended.
Very good on Supushpa Chandra, by the way. So what we're being told here, again, the rejection might be expressed. Well, having compassion, having the sense of connection with all beings might make me feel more stressed at times, might make me feel more pain. And his answer to this is, but if you think of the great suffering of beings, what is our, especially beings in, who are experiencing tremendous suffering, how can we regard as great the smart of our compassion, which is nothing compared to the actual torture that some sentient beings have to go through. And that furthermore, if through such a single pain, which is the pain of our compassion, a multitude of sorrows can be cured, any loving person would say that would be absolutely worth it. Absolutely worth it. Such pain as this, all loving people strive to foster in themselves and others. And then he gives the example of Supushpa Chandra, who taught the Dharma to liberate beings, to bring beings to liberation, even though there was a king who was suppressing Buddhism and knew that he would, suffer as a result of his teaching. But still, just as it said in the previous verse, such pain as this, all loving beings strive to foster. He taught anyway, because that was as he felt the right thing to do. And I think could somebody read verses 107, 108?
Philip. Those whose minds are practiced in this way, whose joy it is to soothe another's ills, will venture into hell of unrelenting pain as swans sweep down upon a lotus lake. The ocean-like immensity of joy arising when all beings will be freed. Will this not be enough? Will this not satisfy? The wish for my own freedom, what is that to me?
So he takes this even further in terms of developing an attitude of complete fearlessness that the Bodhisattva experiences in regard to the expression of compassion for others. And that, again, remember that this entire section has to do with dissolving the boundaries. So in talking about swooping down into the hell of unrelenting pain, it's really a fruitional approach. Pema's point is that we have to foster the heart of Bodhi, the heart of compassion, the wakeful mind in small ways. That it's important that we start where we are, that it's important to start with what's doable to avoid discouragement and burnout. So in fact, for us, it might be small acts of generosity, small moments of making ourselves available to someone else and letting go of our agenda. But at some point, the idea as bodhisattvas is that we would be able to fearlessly swoop into the most terrible situations with great compassion. And again, what allows us to do this with joy, it's not a sense of, hard duty particularly. It's the actual feeling that we might actually be able to free beings from their suffering. But still, we have to start where we are. Could someone read verses 109 and 110?
Mark.
The work of bringing benefit to beings will not then make me proud and self-admiring. The happiness of others is itself my satisfaction. I do not expect any recompense. Therefore, just as I defend myself from even slight disparagement, in just the same way with regard to others, I should likewise have a mind protective and compassionate.
So here again, developing a mind that's protective and compassionate because we regard others as equal to ourselves rather than seeing ourselves as somehow separate. Again, as Pema says, this really comes down to dissolving the barriers, dissolving the boundaries that are conceptually created, habitually created, and being open to that. And that furthermore, in so doing, that we're not looking for any kind of self-promotion or thought of gain, that the happiness of others itself is its own satisfaction. And that we're not looking for any further kind of echo or feedback or any kind of confirmation of ourselves in doing this. In part because, again, we've taken others as equal to ourselves so that, in a sense, there's no difference. Could someone read verses 111 and 112?
Judith.
The drop of sperm and blood belong to others. Yet through strong habituation, I came to have in its regard a sense of I, though in itself it is devoid of entity. And so, why not identify another's body, calling it my I? And vice versa, why should it be to think of this, my body, as another's?
So here again in these verses, he's talking about having again this expanded sense of self, that we can include all beings rather than just a narrow sense of I in the conventional habitual ego sense. And he begins by talking about the drop of sperm and blood, or you could think of it as sperm and ova, came from others. It came from mother and father, and yet we habituate to this body that really came about through other beings as I, and possess it fully as I. So the idea here is, again, he's really working at getting at the sense that this sense of I is a conceptual creation, that it doesn't actually have any inherent sense, that it, in a sense, is devoid of entity. It's no different than, for instance, I think we tend to identify with our names because, again, on a relative truth level, it's very handy to have a name. But at the same time, it's, for most of us, it's not a name that we chose. It's a name that was given to us. There's no inherent Michaelness in me except for what I create conceptually. And it's the same way, I think, for each one of us. So for that reason, he's saying, well, if we can do that, if we can attribute a sense of I, a sense of entity, a truth of some kind of inherent identity to our own body, which actually didn't even come from us. It came from the result of as he says, the drop of sperm and blood belonged to others. Then why can't we identify with all beings? Why can't we identify with another being? And the point is that we can. Could somebody read verse 113?
Lojo.
Perceiving now the faults possessed by I, the ocean of good qualities that are in other, I should lay aside all love of self and gain the habit of adopting other beings.
So this is it. This is the aspiration to develop a habit of seeing the equality of all beings, that the willingness to adopt other beings as being the self. And that one reason we're able to do that is we see the faults that come from being possessed by I, being possessed by ego. All of the things that, and again, Shantideva's audience, which would include monks and Buddhist practitioners, all of the things that go all the way back to the Buddha's first teaching, the Four Noble Truths and the truth of suffering. Could someone read verses 114 and 115?
Shinyi.
Just as hands and other limbs are thought of as the members of a body, can we likewise not consider others as limbs and members of a living whole? Just as in connection with this form devoid of self, my sense of I arose through strong habituation. Why should not the thought of I, through habit, not arise related to another?
So this is the practice of developing a sense of equality of all beings, that we can actually habituate ourselves to think this way, that just as we develop the habit of developing a sense of I that arose through strong habituation, that we can actually, through habit, develop an awareness of our connectedness, the interconnectedness with all beings. That's the practice that we're being asked to do. As is the case with many practices, sometimes what immediately comes up is all of the reasons and all of the fears and hesitations, but that will come up with actually doing that as a practice, or even considering that as a practice. But even that awareness is helpful, even seeing where there's hesitation and anxiety about it. Could someone read verses 116 through 118?
Philip. Thus, when I work for others' sake, there will be no sense of boasting self-congratulation. It is just as when I feed myself, I don't expect to be rewarded. Therefore, just as I defend myself from even slight disparagement, likewise for beings, I shall now grow used to have a mind protective and compassionate. This is why the Lord Avalokita, out of great compassion, blessed his name, that those caught in the midst of multitudes might be released and freed from every fear.
Yeah, so what he's saying in verse 116 is that when I work for others' sake, again, it's not done for any sense of self-congratulation. It's just like taking care of himself. It's just because one becomes able to identify with all beings. When we take care of someone else, we don't expect any great reward, just as we don't expect any great reward when we take care of ourselves. And similarly, just as I defend myself from even the slightest disparagement, now I'll become protective of all beings and compassionate and empathic with all beings. So in this sense, it really goes beyond. This is where the Mahayana goes beyond the Hinayana notion of simply doing no harm, which in itself can be a great accomplishment in this world. But now we're actually going further, being protective, compassionate toward all beings. Could someone read verses 119 to 120?
Daniel.
And so we should be undeterred by hardships, for through the influence of use and habit, people even come to grieve, for those whose very names struck terror in their hearts. Those desiring speedily to be a refuge for themselves and others should make the interchange of I and other, and thus embrace a sacred mystery.
So in verse 119, what he's talking about is that we can become habituated enough so that even the people that we would ordinarily feel fear, anger, and hatred toward, that even with them, we're able to extend compassion. And with that, we've achieved the equality of self and other. Again, to go back to what I said in the beginning, it's as if we'd flattened the field so that the water of compassion easily spreads everywhere. And that this is why meditation on the equality of self and other is a necessary first step before doing the second bodhisattva practice, the second development of bodhicitta practice, which is the exchange of self and other. And through that, embrace the sacred mystery. So with that, I'll turn it over to John.
Okay. So there are two main themes that are working here. One is the theme of the discovery of emptiness, which we're going to be getting into much more in the next chapter, the wisdom chapter. And it has to do with the discovery that our beliefs in I as existing and other, all you guys out there and everything else as existing, is false. That the truth of reality is emptiness, shunyata. Empty of what? Empty of I having any true existence and empty of other. We're going to be coming to this more in the weeks that follow this one. The other main theme is the theme of compassion. That as we begin to devote ourselves more to the benefit of others, because we begin to realize that, in fact, the I-other split is illusory and that others are suffering and we're motivated to help them, we develop compassion. And compassion is not a feeling sorry for. Compassion is a great joy. So what happens is that as the bodhisattva develops compassion for others, which is enabled by beginning to realize that they are no different than he or she, in fact, that they are not separate from he or she, then this brings great joy and happiness into the bodhisattva's life. This is the other side of compassion. And it's what motivates compassion, that one wants to be of benefit to others because it makes one happy, joyful, compassion. So these two themes come together, the theme of compassion, joy and happiness, both for oneself and others, and the theme of knowing what is the real nature of reality, which is that I and other have no true existence. And in doing this, one begins to in beginning to understand this, one is piercing the two veils, they're called. the veil of the klesha avarana and the jnana avarana. Avarana means veil. Klesha means the veil of conflicting emotions. These are the veils of selfishness, selfish emotions, pride, anger, jealousy, hatred, all these things that have to do with protecting me and self-aggrandizing for me. This is the veil of these emotions. And the veil of jnana avarana, the veil of knowledge, wrong knowledge, is the veil of the belief in I and other. And both these veils are being pierced. So we're going to be getting much more into this, especially the piercing of the veil of the belief in I and other in the next chapter. But it's here already because we're moving into it. The whole Bodhisattva path is moving towards this development of wisdom, which is the understanding of emptiness, and compassion. The two of them go together, hand in glove. So, would somebody like to read verses 121 through 124?
Carolyn.
Because of our attachment to our bodies, even little things alarm us. This body, then, this source of so much terror, who would not detest it as the worst of foes? Wishing to relieve our body's ills, our hungry mouths, the dryness of our throats, we steal the lives of fishes, birds, and deer, and lie in wait along the road. And for the sake of profit and position, some things are who even kill their parents. Some there are who even kill their parents. Or steal what has been offered in the triple gem, because of which they'll burn in hell of unrelenting pain. Where are the wise and prudent then, who cherish, guard, and serve the body, who would not perceive it as their foe, and as their foe regard it with contempt?
So here it's this, we're going on. It's the way in which we identify with our bodies, cherish our bodies, protect our bodies, to the extent that we do harm or do a disservice to other people and their bodies, and will commit crimes to protect this body, killing animals and more, and will burn in hell for committing these crimes, it says. Burning in hell means that we'll suffer because we'll be so cut off from others, and we'll feel that the harm that we wanted to protect ourselves from is happening to us. This harm is caused by self-centeredness, and the teachings are all about practicing loving kindness. That in loving kindness, we move towards the true understanding of the way things are, which is emptiness, and we move towards a true appreciation for life, which is compassion. So would somebody read verse 125?
Henry.
Did we do 124?
Did we do 124?
No.
Yeah, we did, didn't we?
I don't think so.
Well, let's read it again then. Go ahead.
Okay. Where are the wise and prudent then, who cherish, guard, and serve the body, who would not perceive it as their foe, and as their foe regard it with contempt? If I give this, what will be left for me? Thinking of oneself, the way of evil ghosts. If I keep this, what will be left to give? Concern for others is the way of heaven.
And this is just saying again, over and over again, that the path of selfishness and of self-centeredness is both delusory, it's the wrong view, it's a misunderstanding, and it's the way of pain. It's the way of unhappiness. It's the way of constant paranoia and self-aggrandizement. Would somebody like to read verses 126 through 128?
Mark.
If to serve myself I harm another, I'll suffer later in the realms of hell. But if for others' sake I harm myself, then every excellence will be my heritage. Wanting what is best for me, stupidity, inferiority, and lower realms result. Let this be changed, applied to others. Honors and the realms of bliss will come. Enslaving others, forcing them to serve me, I will come to know the state of servitude. But if I labor for the good of others, mastery and leadership will come to me.
Here it is again. He's just saying it over and over again. If we work for the good of others, our lives will be made happy, beautiful, compassionate, joyful, and we'll move towards true understanding and release from suffering. And if we work for the benefit of ourselves, we will proceed to hell. Let's read verses 129 and 130.
Judith.
Has come through wishing happiness for others. All the misery the world contains has come through wanting pleasure for oneself. Is there need for lengthy explanation? Childish beings look out for themselves. Buddhas labor for the good of others. See the difference that divides them.
So here it is again. I mean, think of the times that you have been generous and kind and actually moved to help other people and what it produced for them and for you. And this is what he's saying. We should develop true compassion for others and exercise it. And this will lead us to the path of compassion and true knowledge. Let's read verses 131 and 132.
Lodro.
If I do not interchange my happiness for others' pain, enlightenment will never be attained, and even in samsara, joy will fly from me. Living future lives outside the reckoning, even this life needs are not fulfilled. The servants do not do their work, and masters do not pay the wages earned.
So I'm not sure who said this, but my notes say both enlightenment and even worldly joy result from care for others instead of for oneself. True happiness results from a shift in the heart, wanting what is best for others because we see their joys and sorrows as our own. And what it means to see joys and sorrows as our own is that we feel them. We empathize, we can resonate with the joys and sorrows that other people are feeling. And in doing so, then we want to alleviate their sorrows and increase their happiness. Let's read the next two verses.
Shibyi.
Casting far away abundant joys that may be gained in this or future lives. Because of bringing harm to other beings, I ignorantly bring myself intolerable pain. All the harm with which this world is rife, or fear and suffering that there is, clinging to the I has caused it. What am I to do with this great demon?
And then I'll just read this next verse because it really goes with it. If this I is not relinquished wholly, and this is the whole theme of the next chapter, the cultivation of wisdom, of understanding, of emptiness. If this I is not relinquished wholly, sorrow likewise cannot be avoided, because we're so consumed with protecting and self-aggrandizement. If they do not keep away from fire, people cannot escape from being burned. So I think this is Pema who says, life in the cocoon. The cocoon is the shell of self, is the source and the cause of harm, fear, and suffering of the world. I must relinquish it, but how? By seeing the sameness of oneself and others. And the way to see the sameness is through the practice of meditation and the cultivation of prajna through study. Those two go together. And by doing it, one frees oneself from the false belief in I and other and begins to develop true compassion, which is a joy in connecting with and helping others. So somebody read verse 136.
Philip. To free myself from harm and others from their sufferings, let me give myself to others, loving them as I now love myself.
I think we have to experiment with this, to actually experience it. To free myself from harm and others from their sufferings, let me give myself to others, loving them as now I love myself. This is really very radical and very complete. Let's read the next two verses.
Ed.
For I am now beneath the rule of others. Of this you must be certain, O my mind. And now no longer shall you have a thought that does not wish the benefit of beings. My sight and other senses, now the property of others, to use them for myself would be improper. And it is likewise disallowed to use my faculties against their owners.
So he's expressing his resolve to benefit others with everything he's got. And we're being enjoined to do likewise. I think what it takes for our part, speaking for me and for others perhaps, is that we have to experiment with this and begin to find out the truth of it. And the way we do that is by increasing our ability and our activity to help others. Would somebody read the next verse?
Henry.
This is 140.
139.
Oh, 139. Thus, sentient beings will be my chief concern, and everything I see my body has will all be seized and offered for the use and service of all other beings.
And this is, again, his resolve to benefit other beings. And starting with verse 140, he's going to be teaching us his unique version of exchanging self for other. So let's read maybe just the next verse. Someone.
Carolyn.
Take others, lower, higher, equal, as yourself. Identify yourself as other. Then, without another thought, immerse yourself in envy, pride, and rivalry.
So you're experiencing their kleshas. The first purpose of this is to experience the mind of another person. And the second purpose of this is to experience what it's like to be on the receiving end of pride, envy, jealousy, hatred. Let's read the next three verses.
Mark.
139 starting?
41, I think.
141, sorry. He's the center of attention. I am nothing. And unlike him, I'm poor without possessions. Everyone looks up to him, despising me. All goes well for him. For me, there's only bitterness. All I have is sweat and drudgery, while he's there sitting at his ease. He's great, respected in the world, while I'm the underdog, a well-known nobody. What? A nobody without distinction? Not true. I do have some good qualities compared with some. He's lower down. Compared with some, I do excel.
So, I mean, haven't we all had these thoughts? Is it comparing ourselves to somebody who's better than we are in an area where we would like to be considered good or excelling? It's so painful and mean. Um, let's read verses 144, 45, and 46.
Judith.
You're more of the same.
144.
144, yeah.
My discipline, my understanding have declined, but I am helpless, ruled by my defilements. As much as he is able, he should cure me. I will be submissive even to his punishment. The fact is, he does nothing of the sort. By what right, then, does he belittle me? What use, then, are his qualities to me, those qualities of which he's so possessed?
Keep one more.
Indifferent to the plight of living beings who tread the brink of evil destinies, he makes an outward show of virtues and even wants to vie with sages.
So more envy on the part of the speaker. Shantideva putting on the mask of envy, demanding that he, this person who's better than me, should help me. And this is all about envy, feeling less than. Let's keep going, reading the next 1, 2, 3, 4 verses, 143 and 150.
That I might excel, outstripping him, regarded as my peer and equal. In contests, I will certainly secure my fame and fortune, public renown. By every means, I'll advertise my gifts to all the world, ensuring that his qualities remain unknown, ignored by everyone. My faults I will conceal, dissimulate, for I, not he, will be the object of devotion. I, not he, will gain possessions and renown. I will be the center of attention. I will take such satisfaction in his evil deeds and degradation. I will render him despicable, the butt and laughingstock of everyone.
It's so painful. I mean, haven't we all been there in one degree or another at one time or another? Maybe just little bits or maybe lots, who knows? And it's a painful way to be. It's very lonely. We're separated and there's pain to it. And it's ignoble. Let's read verses 151 through 154.
Shinyi.
People say this pitiful non-entity is trying to compete with me. But how can he be on a par with me in learning, beauty, wealth, or pedigree? Just to hear them talk about my excellence, my reputation on lips of all, the thrill of it sends shivers down my spine, a pleasure that I bask and revel in. Even if he does have something, I'm the one he's working for. He can keep enough just to survive, but with my strength, I will steal the rest away. One more?
One more.
I will wear his happiness away. I always hurt and injure him. He's the one who in samsara did me mischiefs by the hundred.
And this is the crime that we all have committed in large or small at different times in ourselves, this crime of pride and selfishness and self-centeredness and of cruelty to others. And he's incredibly a crime of arrogance, really, being superior and oppressor. Let's read verses 155 and 156 and 157.
Philip.
Countless ages, O my mind, you spent, desiring to attain your aims. And what great weariness it was, while your reward was only misery. And therefore, now most certainly apply yourself completely to the good of others. The Buddha did not lie in what he said. You'll see the benefits that come from it. if indeed you had in former times embraced this work and undertaken it, you could not still be lacking in the perfect bliss of Buddhahood.
So, whether we believe this or not, we can try it. And by practicing generosity and compassion for others, we can begin to see if this actually brings joy and happiness into our lives. There's a lot of suffering around us in this world, and we could take some time and address it. Where are we? We're at verse 158, I think. Is that right?
Yes.
Let's read 158 and 159.
Henry.
Therefore, just as you identify a drop of others' blood and sperm and cling to it as though it were yourself, now take sentient beings, others, as yourself. Now for others you should spy on everything your body seems to have, steal it, take it all away, and use it for the benefit of others.
So basically the point here is that selfishness destroys our happiness, and by being generous and exchanging self for others, we find contentment, happiness, and we begin to cut through the false belief in I and others. I think we're being enjoined to try this, if we haven't already, and to see what happens. It's really, we're being enjoined by Shantideva to enter a very different way of life. He says, a way of life that is avoiding or is beyond self-centeredness and loneliness and sorrow. Let's read verses, the next two. 160, the next three, 160, 161, and 162.
Carolyn.
I indeed am happy, others sad. I am high and mighty, others low. I am helped while others are abandoned. Why am I not jealous of myself? Happiness, fulfillment, these I give away. The pain of others, this I will embrace, inquiring of myself repeatedly. I will thus investigate my faults. When others are at fault, I'll take and turn the blame upon myself, and all my sins, however slight, declare and make them known to many.
So Shantideva is going to take the blame, like in the Lojong slogan. And it's caused by neurotic self-absorption. So instead of blaming others, I'll take the blame and turn it on myself. My neurotic self-absorption is the cause of all my suffering, he's saying, as well as my harsh criticism of myself for the purpose of self-betterment. That's a good one, that we are critical of ourselves harshly because we want to be better. Self-centeredness and self-importance are the culprits, and they lead us into suffering, sorrow, and endless error. The error of believing in one's own existence and other. Let's read the next two verses.
Mark.
The fame of others I will magnify, that it might thus outshine my own. Among them I will be as one who serves my lowly labor for their benefit. This ego is my nature, rife with faults. Its accidental gifts I should not praise. Whatever qualities it has, I'll so contrive that they remain unknown to everyone.
So again, he's resolving to squash the false sense of self and ego and to be of benefit to others. That it's not about self-loathing, but of generating confidence in our awakened mind and on our basic goodness or basic generosity. That we're going to develop confidence in that by experiencing it. Let's read the next 1, 2, 3. Next 3 verses.
Lodro.
All the harm, in short, that ego does to its advantage and to others' cost, may all of it descend upon itself, to its own hurt, to others' benefit. Do not let it strut about the place, so arrogant, so overbearing, but like a newly wedded bride, let it be demure and blushing, timorous and shy. Do this, be like that. Such things don't ever do. It's thus that you will bring it forcibly to heel. And if it oversteps the mark, well then, apply the lash.
So here we're being enjoined to deal harshly with our egotism, our sense of self-importance and pride, and self-centeredness. If gentleness doesn't work, adopt more forceful means, the lash. I mean, we're being asked to enter a very different world, I think, at least for me. Let's read the next 3 verses.
Shidi.
And so, O mind, if still you will refuse, though you have been so lengthily advised, since every evil has its roots in you, you are indeed now ripe for punishment. The time when you could do me harm is in the past and now is here no more. Now I see you. Where will you escape? I'll bring you down with all your haunting insolence. Let every thought of working for myself be utterly rejected, cast aside. Now that you've been sold to others, stop your whining, be of service.
This is a very radical and strong order on the part of Shantideva to us to really change our lives very powerfully. Read, let's see, someone read verse 171 and 172.
Philip.
For if, through being inattentive, I do not deliver you to others, you will hand me over, it is certain, to the guards and janitors of hell. For this is how so many times you have betrayed me, and how long I've suffered. Now my memory is full of rancor. I will crush your selfish schemes.
So he's just expressing his resolve to overcome egotism and to become generous and kind. And really, all this is moving towards the wisdom chapter that is coming up. So he says, come present out of ego's dreams and machinations. Resist the seduction of self-absorbed thought and be of benefit to others. Selfishness is the culprit. Selfishness is the enemy. This is wrathful compassion, just like in sort of Mahakala. Yeah. Okay, let's see. I'll just read verse 173 because then we're going to do a bunch of them together. And so it is that if I want contentment, I should never seek to please myself. And likewise, if I wish to guard myself of others, I should always be the guard. And this is just more of the same, being of benefit to other people rather than to oneself, changing the orientation. Let's see, somebody read the next 3 verses, 174 through 176.
Carolyn.
To the extent this human form is cosseted and saved from hurt, just so, to that degree, it dwindles to a weak and fretful state. For those who sink to such a pass, the earth and all it holds are powerless to satisfy, for who can give them all they crave? Their hopeless craving brings them misery, and evil schemes invade their minds, while those with free, untrammeled hearts will never know an end of excellence.
So craving and desire are endless. and bring us unhappiness, while those who've given it up and practice generosity and kindness towards others, look for ways to be of benefit, they'll be happy and wise. The next two verses.
Lodro.
Therefore, for the increase of my body's wants, I'll give no space, no opportunity. And of possessions, those things are the best that do not captivate by their attractiveness. Dust and ashes are the body's final state. This body, which, inert, is moved by other forces. This form so frightening and foul, why do I so regard it as myself?
Yeah. So he's enjoining us to resist the cravings of the body and desire for addiction and desire for an addiction to possessions. And he's saying, I'm not this body, which is going to disappear at death anyhow. It's impermanent. So he's resolving not to identify with it. I mean, don't we all identify so much with our bodies? We talk about them endlessly. And especially those of us who are getting old and watching our bodies start to fall apart. Oh boy. Okay, let's see. 179 and 180. And hold on a second. Let's read all the way to 183. 179 through 183.
Shini.
Alive or dead, what difference does it make? What use is this machine to me? What difference would divide it from a clod of earth? Alas, that I don't rid myself of pride. Through lavishing attention on this body, such sorrow have I brought myself so senselessly. What use is all my wanting, all my hating? What indeed is like a log of wood? Whether I protect and pamper it, or whether it is eaten up by carrion birds, this body feels no pleasure, no aversion. Why then do I cherish it so much? Resentment when it is reviled, or pleasure when it is esteemed. Neither of these two my body feels. So why do I exhaust myself? If I say I do it since it's loved by other people, others whom I thus regard as friends, since all appreciate the bodies that they have, why do I not take pleasure in them too?
So we're constantly being moved by flattery, criticism of our appearance, because we identify with our body. In verse 183, Shantideva says that we claim to cherish our bodies to bring delight to others. But if this is the case, why don't we take the same care with their bodies? Yeah. We're so vain about our bodies and so selfishly self-centered about them. Let's read the next two verses.
Philip.
We're in 184.
184 and 185.
Therefore, free from all attachment, I will give this body for the benefit of beings. And though it is afflicted by so many faults, I shall adopt it as my necessary tool. And so, enough of all my childish ways, I'll follow in the footsteps of the wise. Recalling their advice on carefulness, I'll shun all sleep and mental dullness.
So we're being enjoined again to use our body, our whole self, as a tool for benefiting other beings and following in the footsteps of the Buddhas for the purpose of entering into a more real world and a world of greater happiness, which is the world of compassion. So let's read the last two verses.
Henry.
Like the Buddha's heirs in their compassion, I will bear with all that should be borne. For if I do not labor night and day, when will my sorrows reach their end? Thus, to banish all obscuring veils, I'll bend my mind from the mistaken path, and constantly upon the perfect object, I shall rest my mind in even meditation.
So the perfect goal is reality, that we achieve it here and now. And the mistaken path is the path of dreams, of ego, with its obscuring veils and unhappiness. So we're being enjoined to try this at the very least, and practice compassion, kindness, generosity for others, while we practice our meditation and begin more and more to pierce the veil of belief in the two egos, the ego of self and the ego of others, the existence of self and the existence of others. And we're going to be entering a radically new world. I mean, this is not a trivial undertaking. This is a very profound and radical path that we're being enjoined to tread. So with that, we can have a discussion. We have a few minutes left. Carolyn.
Carol.
Unmute yourself. Yeah, Carolyn.
Is there anywhere, sorry if this is a not profound question, is there anywhere where the idea of putting on your oxygen mask, keep yourself healthy so you can save other people, is that dealt with in the writings at all?
Well, you have to be practical. You need to be, in order to help other people, you have to be in condition to be able to accomplish that. And if it requires wearing an oxygen mask, so be it. Having a crutch, who knows what.
A tool.
A tool, yeah, and to keep yourself fit enough to be of service, fit enough to enjoy the communication with others. Sure, it's practical, common sense.
So say that's why the Mahayana is built on the Hinayana, that in Hinayana practice, we develop some clarity and some stability. And in a sense, that is like putting on our oxygen mask first, so that we're able to deal with things not in a way that doesn't cause more confusion.
Thank you. That was really helpful.
Philip.
So thanks. And thanks for all this teaching. I wanted to say, as radical as this is something we already all know in our heart. If we think about it and look around outside of ourselves, within ourselves, my favorite verse is in this chapter. It's 129. It's the one that says, "All the joy the world contains has come through wishing happiness for others. All the misery the world contains has come through wanting pleasure for oneself." Wherever you look, you see that.
Yeah, I think that's a famous verse. Yeah, it's beautiful. We do. Judith. You're muted, Judith. You're muted. Yeah,
I was going to join Philip. That is the essence. But some of the other verses strike even harder to me, and really expose the way one leads one's life.
It does what about the way one leads one's life?
Exposes without pity the way the mind works, the habit.
Indeed.
Mm. Whoa.
Yeah.
I also thought it was interesting how whether it was higher, equal, or lower, they were all painful.
Yeah. Oof.
I mean, I think, we're being asked to think of how we can be of benefit to others, specifically, to specific individuals or groups or whatever. It's almost like we're being given a homework assignment by Shantideva.
Yeah.
How can we be kind and be of benefit to other people? Each one of us. And experience what that's like. Very.
Yeah. I was struck by the chapters where he's putting himself into the mind of another person. Like, I'm so accomplished and you're just a miserable schlep. And to me, that was a kind of a wonderful, I hadn't really considered Tong Len in that way before. I'd always just taken it as having a sense of a person's suffering, but actually kind of putting yourself into their position of them looking down on you, or, I thought was very powerful.
It could be very difficult too, I find.
Yeah.
Challenging. Fred, you're muted.
Yeah, the part that struck me was when the equalizing self and other. It reminded me of, if like we're driving on the road and we see suddenly a small animal jumps into the road somehow, unconsciously we're going to do everything we can to avoid it. So, like Philip was saying, we innately know this, and I'm starting to see that the whole point of this practice is to wake us up and remind us to that we're always like that by default.
Well, perhaps we should end now. What do you think, Michael? Yeah. And we'll say the closing chant. Who's leading the chants? I've forgotten.
Who was it?
Meg was, but she's not here.
Okay. Somebody want to? Shini, would you lead the chants if I put them up?
My gong is in the other room.
Oh, forget it. Okay.
I can do it.
I can do it if you want.
Thank you, Barry. That's very good.
You got it, Barry?
Let me do it.
Okay, here we go.
Let me whip out my gong here. By the blessings of enlightened and compassionate ones, by the power of my positive actions of 3 times and my prayers of pure aspiration, wars, conflicts, epidemics, and all of the maladies dissolve in this world. And may the earth and all who live on this earth enjoy the abundance of well-being. May all learn to live lovingly with each other. By this merit, may all obtain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great east, may the lotus garden of the Rigna's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory.
Thank you, John Michael, everyone.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Philip, John,
Thank
and
you, John and Michael. Thank you,
Thanks,
everybody.
everybody.
Thank you, Michael.
Good night.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Michael.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
All right. Stay warm.
Bye.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, Michael.